When the world first learned that Suzanne Collins had more to say via the medium of the world of Panem and announced a prequel to the titular Hunger Games trilogy, us fans flipped. But that was not the only announcement. Along with the news of a book came what I thought to be rumors of a supposedly confirmed movie adaptation as well. Apparently, there had already been talks with Lionsgate and even Francis Lawrence, who was the director of all but the first Hunger Games films, about creating a cinematic adaptation of this newly announced prequel. The prequel book, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, following the rise to power of a young Coriolanus Snow, was released in May of 2020, unintentionally very good timing, I might say, and there were certainly some vastly mixed opinions, me on the side of praising it, but nothing more about a film. It was somewhat debated whether this was because it truly was a baseless rumor, or because it was shut down. However, yesterday, April 28th, for those watching far later, I received a flurry of messages informing me that yes, a movie has been confirmed. 8 years after the final film's release, November 17th, 2023, we will be stepping into the cinematic world of Panem yet again. Hey y'all, I'm the Geek Apprentice, and how weird is it to do a Hunger Games video outside of Hunger Games month? And for those who have absolutely no idea what I am referring to, you may click here to be taken to an old, quite cringeworthy video where I explain why November is Hunger Games month on this channel. Coincidentally, November is when the prequel film is releasing. So that's awesome. So here we are, almost 2 years to the date after the release of The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and a movie is coming. I don't have a lot of information, as aforementioned. I mostly received comments on videos and direct messages, as well as a couple of texts, one from my mom and one from an old friend that had actual screenshots of an article. So I did some research. I found several articles stating that this was announced at the end of a Lionsgate presentation at something called CinemaCon. I personally am more into gaming announcements, specifically Nintendo Directs, so this was kind of cool to find out that films have their own version. Probably should have been obvious to me, but now I know. The articles I read stated that there was a minute-long teaser trailer at the end of the presentation by Lionsgate, and although it was only something about here's a release date and something about a tree and snow melting on it, I cannot, for the life of me, find this video anywhere. Please, 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 I beg of you, if you find this little teaser trailer, please send it my way. I'm hoping that in the next few days, the YouTube channel for Lionsgate will release it on their channel. But until then, help, please. Other than who's producing it, directing it, and when it's releasing, I didn't find anything further. I have a lot of thoughts, but I hope to condense them in this video so as to not drone on, and also not to come across as a negative Nancy. Look, if you're familiar with the world of movie adaptations of books, you know that it can be anywhere on the spectrum of bad to good. I've heard many times, though I am not involved with the fandom myself, that the adaptations for the Percy Jackson books were absolutely terrible. Then you have something like Harry Potter, which was great. It wasn't phenomenal, but it was definitely great, and I loved going to see the films, and it was a wonderful time. Then you have the complete other end of the spectrum, which is Lord of the Rings, where even people that I know who absolutely adore the books adore the films as well. They recognize the differences and they're okay with it. Sometimes they consider them separate entities. And for me personally, I loved the Hunger Games adaptations. Were they perfect? No, but they can't really be perfect. And I have a video that you can click here to see where I talk about what the films did right. Talking about Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, in my sort of book review, if you will, I raved about it. I didn't think it deserved the backlash it got, but was rather very much misunderstood, if you will. It seemed as though many people expected it to either be just fanfare for them, or to be exactly like the trilogy, which there's no way it could have. Though I'm not sure if the book could stand on its own without the knowledge of the main trilogy. Jury's out on that one for me. But even if it can't stand on its own, I don't think that's a dig at it, as it's supposed to be a prequel to the trilogy. You're supposed to know the trilogy first, and Moving on. Some said that it portrayed Snow as too evil and didn't sympathize with him enough, while others said the exact opposite. Opinions, opinions, opinions. And that's fine. While I do still stand by the book and its genius, I began rereading it a second time a few months ago, and I won't deny that it was a little bit more difficult to read the second time around. Part of that is not even the book's fault, as I am in my busiest season at work. However, it just didn't snatch me like it did the first time. But I only got a few chapters in before I got overwhelmed with work. So now, with the film coming out, I have even more incentive to finish and take copious notes. I think I still like it, but it might be good to do a retrospective in the future. While you can hear most of my garbled thoughts in this video, though I definitely missed a ton. Janice just didn't even address Janice. What's wrong with me? I don't know why. I still stand by my initial thoughts on the book. And personally, I don't think it's meant to be a let's sympathize with the villain story, as we have a ton of those right now. Suzanne herself stated that she had more she wanted to say, and it just so happened that the world of the Hunger Games, specifically through the origin story of Snow's rise to power, was the way to do it. So it wasn't that she just wanted to create Snow's origin story, but rather that the story itself was an ideal way to tell us other things. And she got extra lucky that the state of the world at the time of the book's release allowed for there to be more readers and potentially more open-minded ones. I do think some of her more subtle thoughts and points were lost on many, which leads me to the film. My hesitation with a film adaptation. Like I've said before, Lionsgate and Francis Lawrence did a great job with the films, I thought, after the rocky start of the original one, which, yes, I know was Gary Ross, not Francis Lawrence. I'm really glad it wasn't Gary Ross after the first one, personally. And they also had a bigger budget, I recognize that. I have no doubt that they are going to go all out with this prequel. I do, however, doubt their accuracy with the nuances and pointed messaging. No, I don't think the book spells out a specific this is right and this is wrong about certain topics, but that it does invite you to think. And you have to think via the intriguing conversations between Snow and Lucy Gray Baird, specifically more towards the end of the book. Suzanne Collins was honest about what can lead someone to turn out like Snow, while also realizing that he was probably predisposed to turn out that way, given his possible narcissism and even possibly psychopathy. He still made choices he didn't have to. Even with his situation, he could have chosen better and was given the opportunity to. It's a mix of nature versus nurture, but we all have choices to make. Regardless, we know who Snow becomes because we've read the trilogy, and no one wants to be compared to Snow, right? Well, I think a lot of people today, maybe more specifically in Hollywood or media, perpetuate the idea or even truly believe they are like Lucy Gray and want the good things she's talking about, but in reality, are far more like Snow and actually closer to his practices and ideals and ways of thinking. On the flip side, many are made out to be just like Snow, just as evil, but they actually do practice what Lucy Gray preaches and talks about. I could go on forever and more detail with more examples about exactly what I mean, but I don't think it would be good for the video or for this channel. Maybe in a one-on-one in-person conversation, sure, but not in a video. I don't think that level of detail is my forte. Again, in-person conversation might be totally different. But getting back to my hesitation, without many details, I fear, and I think legitimately so, that Hollywood or media in general, whatever you want to consider Lionsgate and the people that work in that environment, would not be true to the book in a philosophical sense. I could see them probably spinning things to fit their agenda, which we already know they do a lot, right? Not every film is like that, of course. I could see them minimizing aspects of the book that would encourage an audience to think critically, while also magnifying elements that were totally unimportant in the book, but they are able to use them in a way that fits a narrative they have. We've seen them do it. I'm not talking about specifically with the Hunger Games adaptations, but just in general. Media and movies and films and TV in general. But I could be totally 100% wrong. The film could come out and it could be great and does not at all go heavy on those elements, as the book itself doesn't even go super heavy on those elements, but rather hints at them and invites the reader to ponder how that could apply to their world. That's how good art should be. invite you to think, not tell you what to think. Sadly, I think many artists today claim this is what they're doing, but they're not. They're totally just pushing their ideals on you. And no, I'm not talking about a specific group. Anyone from any creed, if you will, can do this. And I hope I am wrong in my doubts. I think I've just grown harsh and developed these calluses when it comes to films and Hollywood and media nowadays. But I mean, that's part of growing up and becoming an adult, am I right? I'm not 16 anymore, y'all. It's been a long 10 years. In the end, I'm not that crazy for having these doubts. Can you blame me after the past few years? But I'm going to try and remain hopeful, as it's kind of draining to be otherwise. I've got to choose optimism and wait to bring in that critical thinking once I've seen and processed the film itself, which is a ways away. It's the same film company, it's the same director, and even has one of the same screenwriters as Catching Fire did, which was my favorite of the books and the film adaptations. So it could be phenomenal. On a totally different final note, I know people are gonna ask, who do you think's gonna be cast? I'm not that up to date on actors and actresses. I had an idea of who could play Snow, but I think he's too old now. He still looks young, but he's probably still too old for the role. But alas, I did try to go to IMDb and see if they had anything spilled there. They did not, so we'll have to wait and see. So those were my lengthy and borderline depressingly negative thoughts on the newly announced film adaptation of the prequel to The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Hope I didn't leave a bad taste with my negativity, so I tried to make sure I ended on a positive note. Because, in fact, I could be totally wrong. And that would be great if I'm wrong. And all things considered, I'm actually super giddy at the thought of getting that cinematic experience again, especially with this world. Going to see these films on their release date were some of my favorite memories. And it brings up such wonderful feelings of nostalgia to think about doing it again. I'm hoping it's going to exceed expectations, as y'all who are a part of the geekdom know how much I love this series. Speaking of the geekdom, if you would like to become a part of it, you can do so by subscribing to the channel, possibly. I do talk about other things like Zelda, Animal Crossing, the occasional How to Train Your Dragon, and a few other geeky fandoms. Like I said, I have an entire month dedicated to the Hunger Games. And thanks a million to everyone who supports me as a channel member or over on Patreon, especially those in the highly end tier like Joking Batman, Code and Data, Trevor, and McToppler. But anyway, that's all for today. Thank you for watching, and may the odds be ever in your favor.